everyone, and thank you so much for taking the time to join today's NeedyMeds special topic webinar, which we will get started in just a moment. In the meantime, I'm going to ask the audience to help me out with an audio visual check. If you can hear me clearly and if you can see my screen, which is the first slide of a PowerPoint presentation, I'd appreciate it if you would send me a message in the questions section of your GoToWebinar control panel. And while your responses are hopefully coming in, I'm going to also do an audio check with our guest panel, Rose. So Rose, if you can hear us, let us know and give us a shout out as well. Thanks, everyone.
Hi, Carla. I'm here.
Fantastic. So thank you to Rose for being with us, and I'm glad that we can hear her clearly as well. And thank you to our audience members for letting me know that you can hear us clearly and see my screen, which is again the first slide of a PowerPoint presentation. So with that, I think we're ready to go ahead and get started. So again, thank you for joining the NeedyMeds special topic webinar, Samaritans Suicide Prevention. My name is Carla. I am the Director of Education and Partnerships at NeedyMeds. And before we get started, I'd like to go over a few tips so you can make the most out of today's presentation. If you have any questions, you can type them in at any time to the questions section of your GoToWebinar control panel. Just know we will reserve answering questions until the end. If we don't have the time to answer your question, we will follow up with you personally via email. Of course, we encourage you to reach out to Samaritans or NeedyMeds sooner if needed. So I will provide the contact information for both organizations. You can find copies of the PowerPoint slide decks used in today's presentation in the handouts section of your control panel. Also, this webinar is being recorded and will be available for viewing on the NeedyMeds YouTube channel. So with that, let's get started with what is NeedyMeds. What you are looking at is our mission statement and a statement about how we achieve our mission. But simply put, NeedyMeds connects people to programs that will help them afford their healthcare expenses. And we do that free and anonymously through our website, needymeds.org, and our helpline, 1-800-503-6897. What you're looking at now is a screenshot of the NeedyMeds homepage. And our website is really the face of our organization. And as you can see, it's full of resources. I'd just like to point out a few. You can find healthcare savings resources under that patient savings tab and educational resources under the advocates tab. That's where you can sign up for our monthly newsletter, see other webinars that are coming up, or order print materials. I mentioned that this presentation is being recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel. And you can find a link to that on the top right of our homepage with the rest of the social media icons. It's the third one from the left. And we hope you subscribe. And you can also find other upcoming webinars on the bottom right-hand calendar of events. So please do check that out. So, as you saw in our mission statement, an important part of what we do is educating people. And we define that by letting people know about NeedyMeds and the resources we have, but also by letting them know about other resources and important healthcare topics, which is why we are so pleased to have a representative from Samaritans with us today. So let me tell you just a bit about Samaritans. Samaritans, Inc. is a suicide prevention nonprofit. Their mission is to reduce the incidence of suicide by alleviating despair, isolation, distress, and suicidal feelings. In this webinar, you will learn about risk factors and warning signs for suicide, how to talk to someone who may be suicidal, and basic steps for getting a suicidal person help. Now, let me tell you a bit about our guest, Rose Chayette, who will be walking us through this information. Rose is the Director of Community Education and Outreach with Samaritans, Inc. of Boston. In this position, she teaches suicide prevention workshops to youth, adults, and elders throughout the greater Boston area. Prior to this position, Rose spent 2 years answering calls and texts on the Samaritans helpline. So without further ado, and hopefully seamlessly, I'm going to pass the mic and the screen to Rose. So bear with us while we do that. And a reminder as Rose takes over that screen that, again, if you have any questions, you can go ahead and submit them by typing into that question section of your GoToWebinar control panel. And with that, I'm going to pass the mic to Rose. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much, Carla, for that introduction. So, hi, everybody. Again, my name is Rose Chayette, and I'm really pleased to be here doing this webinar today for NeedyMeds. And again, we are a suicide prevention organization, and we are located in Boston. So here are some of our objectives for this webinar today. And I want to just mention that this is a really heavy topic, and we are going to be diving right into it. And I have to believe that there might be some folks out there that maybe this topic has affected you. Maybe you yourself have dealt with these thoughts before. Maybe you've supported somebody who has. Maybe you're just having a tough time. So I just really encourage you, if this topic is feeling triggering or challenging or upsetting in some way, please don't hesitate to leave the webinar, take care of yourself. And you might notice that at the bottom of every single slide is our Samaritans helpline number, which is a resource that I'm going to speak more about in a minute, but anyone can utilize this to, reach out to it and talk to someone if this webinar does bring something up for you that's upsetting. And we're going to be looking at this topic from the perspective of how we can best support those at risk for suicide. And this could be family, could be friends, colleagues, somebody that you support through your job, really anybody that we could be coming across who might be struggling. So we have a number of Samaritans Resources, and I want to really focus in on this because we have people all over the country who have dialed in on our nationwide resource, which is that 24/7 helpline, which I mentioned, which is there at the bottom of the screen. And this is a helpline that people can call or they can text 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, regardless of what is going on in life. Now, I know sometimes when people hear about helplines like this, there's sometimes that assumption that, this is just a quote-unquote suicide hotline, and this resource is only for people who are thinking about suicide or are in that dark place. And yes, of course, we do get calls and text messages every day from people who are thinking about suicide. And we actually get a huge number of people reaching out every day who aren't in a crisis, who are not thinking about suicide, but are really struggling with something. So this number is really for anything that's going on in life, day or night. It's anonymous and confidential, which means that if somebody were to reach out to us, they don't have to share their name or their age or where they live. All they have to do is talk about whatever is on their mind, and we'll be there for them. I also want to share that if we are speaking to somebody who is thinking about suicide, there's a couple things that we do, which I think sort of goes against what we might naturally feel inclined to say to someone. So for example, if I'm speaking to someone, they've shared that they're thinking about suicide, I might be really inclined to say to them, you have so much to live for. And that's a really sort of knee-jerk reaction thing to say because, they're down here in this really dark hole, this dark place. I want to pull them out of there. I want to make them think about all the positive things they might have going on in life, but they're not really feeling like they have anything to live for in this moment. So I'm actually not going to say that to them. All I'm going to do is I'm going to listen and show compassion and show empathy. And maybe through a conversation, they might be able to sort of find that hope within themselves and pull themselves out of that hole. But I'm not going to say to them, come on, you have so much to live for. They're really not feeling that way. I'm also going to try to avoid saying things like, think about your friends, think about your family. Maybe they're thinking about all of those people around them, yet they're really feeling like a burden, and they're really feeling like everybody's just better off without them. So again, what we do on our helpline, what all of us can do, is just kind of take somebody where they're at, show that compassion, that empathy, that real active listening, and that can just be huge for someone who feels really alone, who feels like no one is listening to them. We have a couple other resources that are more specific to Massachusetts. I'm not going to go into those, but if you are within Massachusetts and want to learn more about those, I encourage you to go to our website to learn more about those other resources. I want to share a couple of statistics. That number, a couple things to mention though, that number in the top left-hand corner there of the number of people that have died by suicide in the United States, it's probably not accurate. And the reason for that is that there are suicides that occur that are not reported as being suicides. This could be a car accident. This could be a drug overdose. So that number is likely pretty low, actually, and chances are the number is much higher. But this is a number that has been reported, and that number, unfortunately, has been going up steadily year to year. And over here on the right side, at the moment, the highest suicide rate is reportedly among adults aged 45 to 64, particularly men, with elders a very, very close second. And women actually attempt suicide more than men do, but men die by suicide at much higher rates. Various reasons behind this. There's not one single thing, but a couple of things to note is one, just in terms of our society, a lot of men are told to, quote unquote, man up, be strong, don't show emotion, don't be vulnerable or ask for help. And it's a little bit different for women, but it also comes down to the means, the method in which a lot of people take their lives, and men tend to gravitate towards more lethal means, such as firearms, statistically, whereas women not as much. So, one of the challenges of sharing statistics is that it sometimes paints this as kind of a black and white issue when suicide is so far from black and white, and every situation is really different. But I think it's valuable to at least share a little bit to help show the impact of suicide and the fact that this is really a public health crisis that people really aren't talking about very much. And as I know we do have people from all over the country, I wanted to just show this map. So the darker the color on this map, the higher the rate of suicide is. A lot of factors go into this. It's not one thing. Isolation could play a role in this. Weather, access to hospitals or mental health resources, and access to lethal means is one thing to keep in mind, just that it does seem that some states that have lower gun ownership or make it harder for somebody to access guns tend to have lower rates of suicide. So it's not a cause, but it does appear to correlate to some of these statistics. So very quickly, I want to do this little true or false. Our first one says, talking about suicide will cause someone to consider suicide. I think for a long time there was the perception that this was absolutely true, but I think it's starting to change. And the fact is that this really is false. That really is a myth. There are some nuances to it, but talking about suicide is actually a really effective way to prevent suicide. By putting this topic out there, by asking somebody directly, have you been thinking about suicide? It can allow someone who's struggling to realize, oh, this is something I can talk about. This is a safe person. This is someone who's not going to judge me, who's willing to have this conversation. We ask every caller, every texter on our helpline if they are feeling suicidal. And a lot of times people share with us almost like this weight has been lifted off of their shoulders, like a huge sense of relief that they are being asked the question without judgment, just very directly. And so I know that this is a scary question to ask someone. I do know that. I completely acknowledge that. And I know that, in an hour webinar, you're all not going to, you're not going to leave the webinar feeling 100% comfortable or confident. in this topic, but what I would hope is that you would all leave this webinar feeling slightly more empowered to know, okay, if I'm worried about somebody in my personal life, in my professional life, in some capacity, I can ask them directly about suicide. I will not place the idea into their head. I will not influence them to do it. I might, in fact, be opening up a conversation that they are truly desperate to have with somebody. I'm going to do one more of these true or falses. The next one is a tough one. People who are suicidal usually warn those around them. And the fact is, this can be true and it can be false. I do have it noted as being true here. The reason for that is there is some evidence out there to suggest that about 70% of the time there are warning signs, but not always. And it's really a tough one because every situation is so different. And sometimes there are warning signs, but they were subtle, or there are warning signs that certain people saw, but not everyone saw, or maybe it seemed to signify something else was going on. It's a very challenging one. So it's important just to keep in mind that it's true, it can be true and it can be false. I think the best thing we can do is be educated and be aware of what those warning signs could be. And then if we're seeing something, if we're seeing a change in a person that seems different or off, or we just have one of those gut feelings inside, like something doesn't seem right, we sort of trust our instincts and talk to that person. But we're going to dive more into what some of those examples might be. And lastly, this is hopefully an easy one, but no, it's not a sign of weakness to ask someone for help. I think it's a sign of strength to ask for help, as hard as that can be. Just something that I think is important to put out there. This is a really, as I've mentioned, it's a really complex topic. And one of the complexities is that suicide is generally not about wanting to end the life, but about wanting to end the pain. The pain feeling so overwhelming for someone that, they're in this place and maybe they really truly want to live, but they're just feeling like they simply can't under the weight and the pressure and all of that pain that they're in. I think that's an important thing to keep in mind. Also important to keep in mind that it's never just one event or situation or life circumstance that leads someone to having these thoughts. It's generally more complex than that. Sometimes, as you can see at the top, I have a precipitating event. So maybe there could be someone who experiences something a really challenging life event, and then they attempt suicide. But we can't really blame the precipitating event because there likely was more going on beneath the surface. So just something to keep in mind. Never just that one isolated event or thing. It's usually a lot more complicated. And kind of piggybacking off of that, these are some examples of risk factors. Now, risk factors are not causes of suicide because, like I said, there's not one thing that causes it. But these are examples of risk factors that a person could go through, things that could build up for somebody. So, not everyone who has a mental illness is suicidal. Not everyone who deals with trauma is suicidal, but maybe there is a person who's dealing with a number of these risk factors. And maybe on top of all those risk factors that they're facing, maybe they are dealing with a mental illness. Maybe they do have a lack of coping skills. Maybe there's a lack of support. Maybe some of these risk factors have been building since they were young, or maybe there's sort of so many that have just been piled onto them at once, almost like a perfect storm type of scenario. And if someone is feeling so overwhelmed by these things and feeling like they don't have the support and they're lacking the coping skills, they might start to feel really hopeless and really helpless and maybe start to feel like, I can't do this. I don't even want to be here anymore, to have to deal with this. And if someone starts to have those thoughts, those dark thoughts, and maybe starts to contemplate suicide, again, like I mentioned a couple minutes ago, we certainly don't always have warning signs, but it's good to know some of the examples of what some of those warning signs could be if they are presenting. As you can see, they generally fall into 3 categories: verbal, physical, and behavioral. With the verbal ones, sometimes they're pretty explicit and pretty clear what the person is saying. I think more often than not, they are a little bit more subtle. They might not, we might hear it and not totally know what the person was getting at. Sometimes there's people even making jokes about suicide. It can be really hard to decipher and understand. My recommendation for everybody is if you hear a statement, if you hear somebody say something or even see something on social media or in a text or in an email, even if it seems like a joke or kind of a casual statement, I think it's worthwhile to check in. Say to someone, I heard what you said. I saw what you wrote. When I hear statements like this, I take it really seriously. Are you actually feeling this way? Are you struggling? And I think what's important to keep in mind too is that sometimes people say things in a joking way or maybe not in a joking way, but they're almost testing the people around them to see, is anybody really listening? Is anybody really taking me seriously? So that might sound really uncomfortable or even awkward to approach somebody who's made a direct or indirect verbal statement, but I think it's really valuable to do. Or if you're not comfortable doing that, maybe finding somebody else who can assist with that. With physical warning signs, again, these are all changes. A change in somebody's sleep patterns or their appetite, a change in their hygiene, something about the way that they look. With the behavioral ones, their performance has been going down. If they're a child, maybe in school, if they're an adult at work, they're starting to withdraw from people. They just don't care about the things that used to give them pleasure, the things they used to enjoy. Maybe they stop taking medicine or listening to what a doctor is saying, kind of engaging in some of that reckless behavior. I do want to also focus on the warning sign that's down here in the bottom left-hand corner. I think it's kind of the only one on this page that's not very self-explanatory. It says a sudden mood lift after a down period. Now, this could mean a lot of things, but what I think that we need to think about is, if there maybe what this actually is getting at is that there's a person who has come up with a plan to end their life. So if we imagine a person who has seemed really low, down, depressed, and then there's the spike and they seem happier, more content, our first instinct is going to be they're getting help. They're getting the help they need. Things are better. It could be that, which is what makes this so hard, but it could also be that they actually have come up with a plan to end their life and they are feeling a little bit better because they're seeing an end to that pain. Like we talked about before, often suicide is not about wanting to end the life, but wanting to end the pain. So again, this is a really challenging one. It kind of goes against what I think is our natural way of thinking, but it is something that's really valuable to keep in mind. Again, this is not an all-inclusive list of the warning signs that can occur, but these are pretty common. The changes don't happen overnight. I would say at least a 2-week period, if not longer, of seeing that change in the person. But again, what we can do is if we have seen a change or two in a person, or we have that gut feeling inside, we can pull that person aside and say, I've noticed you seem a lot more tired than what I've known about you. Or I used to see you at church every Sunday. I haven't seen you in a couple of months. Or, whatever that change is, putting it out there, that can be really hard. It can feel intrusive. It can feel uncomfortable. But imagine someone who is really struggling and feeling really alone and feeling like no one is seeing them. And then you come up to them and say, hey, I noticed this, I noticed that. It got me a little worried. Is something going on? Are you okay? That can help somebody feel like, wow, someone saw me, someone noticed me. And this is a way to kind of facilitate conversation. And if they really are thinking about suicide, this could be sort of the first step of diving into that conversation about suicide. So we're just going to do this sort of like visual exercise right now and basically kind of look at how events in a person's life can build up to the point that maybe they actually feel like they're drowning. So, for example, we have a woman here, 60 years old, and she's had a fair number of difficulties and stressors and real challenges in her life. So we'll just start from the bottom. At 30, her mother passed away. 35, she started this high-stress job. At 40, she got a divorce. 45, she was diagnosed with depression. She broke her hip at age 50. 55, she became addicted to painkillers. And at 60, she actually started to think about suicide. And I think this is a really valuable visual to just think about, again, like I said before, that things can build. Risk factors, challenges, stressors, whatever they are, they can build and they can build and they can build for someone. And maybe we see a person or we know someone who's struggling. Maybe we know one thing. We know that they have broken their hip, but we might not possibly know everything else that's been going on for them just by looking at them. I mean, everybody handles situations differently. Everybody has different things on their plate that they are dealing with. So it's important for us to realize that, we may think that there's one little thing or one thing that a person is facing, but actually they may be dealing with so much more, and they could be at a point where they're truly feeling like they are drowning under the weight of everything. So just something to keep in mind. So just like we all have different challenges in our lives that we are facing, maybe people give off different warning signs. We all cope in different ways as well. So when I do my workshops in person, I have everybody take a minute and write down their personal coping skills. So you don't all have to do it right now, but I actually encourage you, after the webinar or some point soon, just like take a minute, brainstorm, and maybe even write down 3 to 5 things that you yourself do to cope with stress or pain or challenges. And I'm guessing it's hopefully not too hard to think of a couple things that can help you. I know that the challenging part is often finding the time, putting those coping skills into action, because our time can be so limited. We have work, we have responsibilities, we're taking care of people through our work, outside of our work. It can be hard to find the time to take care of ourselves, but something really valuable to think about and sort of remember is that we really can't take care of anybody else if we're not able to take care of ourselves. Kind of a good analogy for that is when you're on the airplane, they tell you to put the oxygen mask on yourself first and then on other people. Kind of a good analogy for, again, focusing on ourselves first, caring for ourselves first, and then caring for the people around us. And one other thing I'll just mention while we're on this slide is I have certainly come across people through my professional life, my personal life, who seem to really be lacking in sort of the self-care coping skills department. And sometimes what I think people's natural reaction, if we find someone who is having a hard time dealing, is to tell them, oh, well, why don't you just, go for a walk, get some fresh air, or try meditation, or watch a funny movie. It's sort of easy to tell people what to do, or even tell them what we do and that they should try that. But everybody copes differently, and it's not going to be that helpful for me to tell someone, oh, do this, do that, when we're such different people going through such different things. So generally, if I'm interacting with someone who is struggling, and I want them to I want to learn what helps them or sort of even find out what's helped them in the past. I might even just say to them, hey, I know what helps me when I'm having a really hard time. I have no idea what's going to help you. I just don't know, but I'd love to hear what's helped you in the past, or even telling them, do you want me to share a few things that I know work for some people, and you can tell me if any sound good to you? And then, you could model some sort of quote unquote healthier coping skills, and maybe something will stick. Maybe they'll think, oh, I never really thought about doing X, Y, or Z. Maybe I can try that. So kind of putting it out there, not saying do this, do that, but modeling some of those healthier coping mechanisms and kind of seeing what sticks for them or what they might even have access to. So we're going to dive into now what we can do to support someone. Maybe it's a person that some of those risk factors in their life, some of the challenges that they're facing, or maybe you don't. Maybe you've seen some changes, some potential warning signs. You're just not really sure. And again, I keep saying this, but maybe you just have that gut feeling inside. And I think it's important to follow that gut feeling and trust our instincts. So maybe that's the situation. You just feel like something seems off and I want to dive in and talk to them. So the first thing is listening. And listening is just so important. And I'm talking true active listening, which is very hard to do because, we talk to people all the time, but our minds are wandering constantly. So this is the kind of listening where we are shutting down the wandering mind, shutting down the voice inside our head that's telling us, oh, don't forget to do this or take out the trash or whatever it might be. It's about totally focusing on the person who's there in front of us. So we really have to show that we are truly listening to them. And there's a lot of things that we can all do to show that we're listening. We can make sure that we're making eye contact with them. We can make sure to have an open posture. We're going to put away distractions, turn off the TV, put away the phone, whatever it might be. If we're talking to them face to face, we want to nod. Having, I know I said an open posture, so that what I kind of mean by that is, facing them, but not crossing our arms. I mean, I cross my arms all the time, but if I'm having a more serious conversation with someone, I want to make sure that they look at me and don't feel judged or don't feel that I'm bored or, whatever else they might be thinking. So kind of having that open posture, I think, is really important. If we're talking on the phone, because, obviously many of us might be supporting somebody over the phone, if I'm nodding my head, well, they can't see me. So I have to verbalize the fact that I'm nodding. Things we do in the helpline here, we call them verbal nods, like, I hear you. Tell me more about that. Sort of like little things to show that you're still there, but without interrupting them. So these are some of the do's, some of the don'ts. So with this first don't that we have here, this is a challenging one because if I'm speaking to someone and they share something that they have been going through and I perceive or know that I've been through something very similar, it's really hard to not relate it back to ourselves and say, oh my gosh, I totally, completely know what you're going through. I've been there. I understand. And the positives of saying things like, I understand, I get it, I've been there, is they might not feel so alone. And that can be so comforting to know I'm not the only one who's gone through this. However, some of the negatives, and the reason that I have it in the don't column, is I probably don't actually know what they're going through. And that can be frustrating if you're opening up to someone or you're opening up to a lot of people and they're all saying, oh, I've been there, I get it. And you're like, well, everyone's saying they get it and they understand, but I don't think anybody actually does understand what I'm going through. It can be a little bit frustrating and a little bit isolating. So, maybe if you have a very close relationship with someone and you feel comfortable kind of reflecting on your own experiences, maybe that's one thing. But I do think it's worthwhile to, at least in the beginning of that conversation, hold back a little bit and just let them talk about what they're going through. The other thing I have up here under the don't, which is really hard, is giving advice. And this, I think, goes against the way that our brains are naturally wired. We hear a problem, we want to fix that problem. But, some of the negatives of giving advice is that, first off, I might think that I give great advice. I might not. Or maybe I give good advice to some people, but I give them advice and the situation gets much worse. They might come back and put the blame onto me. Maybe they don't actually want advice. They need someone to hear them. And also the fact is, if I start, I'm listening to somebody, but then I start giving them advice, well, I can't really actively listen and give advice and problem solve at the same time. I just have stopped listening. So this is a hard one. It really is. I struggle with this in my own life, absolutely. But I think it's really worthwhile to think about, the next time somebody comes to you with a problem, if in your brain you start thinking, I know what they should do, I'm going to fix that problem, I would hold off a little bit. I would continue to listen to them without giving the advice, and they might feel so much better that you listened, because that's what they probably really need and really want. The next thing, if we're listening to somebody, we have to be asking them questions. And at Samaritans, we really sort of encourage asking questions that begin with what and how and when, really open-ended questions that can't be answered with a simple yes or no. We recommend trying to avoid why questions, because sometimes when we ask questions with why, why are you feeling this way? Why did you do that? They might feel a lot of pressure to answer the question. They probably don't know why. They might even feel like they're being judged, or like they suddenly have to defend themselves to us. So it can be challenging to reword those questions, avoiding why. But I think it's very important to try. We also try to follow this 80-20 rule, which essentially means that the person who's reaching out to us who's struggling can get sort of 80% of the talking space, and we as the person listening will get 20%. Now, this is sort of a magical ratio that obviously does not always work, but I think it's a nice sort of guideline to think about, of just trying to give somebody more talking space. The last thing I want to mention up here is the final bullet point, which is just to keep in mind that no matter how comfortable we are having difficult conversations, no matter our experience, there are going to be times that we're going to find ourselves at a loss for words and sort of be there with this person and almost freeze up and feel kind of uncomfortable. And that's normal. It's okay to not know what to say. And it's actually okay to voice that to the person. It's okay to say to someone, I don't even know what to say right now, but I'm really glad that we're talking, or I'm really glad that you came to me, or my gosh, I'm just at a loss, but please tell me more. I'm here for you. I want to hear more. So it's okay to voice that loss for words. It's not about finding the perfect words. It's about just being sincere and compassionate and there for somebody. So if I'm speaking to someone and I am listening, asking questions, showing that compassion, showing that empathy, maybe I'm hearing a lot of hopelessness and a lot of helplessness, and I actually want to dive in deeper and try to kind of gauge where they are at. And so I'm going to ask them directly about suicide. So the first thing I'm going to say to them probably is, thank you. Thank you for coming to me. Thank you for talking to me. I can hear how much you're struggling. I can see the pain that you're in. I'm worried about you, though. Do you sometimes feel so bad that you think about suicide? Or have you had thoughts of ending your life? Or even, do you wish you could go to sleep and not wake up? These are 3 examples of ways that this question can be asked. My sort of personal preference and what Samaritans does is we really use the word suicide. And just sort of personally, I like using that word because it doesn't beat around the bush. It faces it head on. But these other 2 examples here are perfectly fine ways to ask the question. The point is just that it needs to be direct. It really has to be a direct question, because I don't want to ask the question and feel more confused by the situation, this really is a yes or no question. So however you might feel comfortable asking it, I think as long as you're putting it out there, it's important, but thinking about asking it directly sort of to get that clarity is really important. Now, if I were to ask this question and the person that I was engaging with said, no, I haven't thought about suicide, I'm probably going to feel some relief. I'm probably going to feel like, oh, I'm so glad to hear that. I'm so relieved you're not feeling that way. And the challenge, the negative of sharing that relief is that, well, they could be lying to me. Maybe they actually have been thinking about suicide, but they didn't feel comfortable sharing that. And now I just said to them, I'm so glad you're not feeling that way. Well, they might not feel comfortable coming back to me with that if they ever want to talk about that. It kind of builds to the stigma. So if I get that no, I'm going to say to them, thank you for telling me that. Let's talk some more. I want to hear more about what you're going through, and kind of continuing to listen and support them. If, however, I get a yes to that question, yes, I have thought about suicide, I'm going to share a little bit of what we do at Samaritans. And the fact is, some of this is a little bit high level. It's pretty in-depth, but I just think it's important for everybody to know that it's okay to really dive into these questions if you get a yes response, because suicidality is kind of on a spectrum. At one end of the spectrum, we have someone who's thinking about suicide, who has suicidal ideation. And then way over on the other end of the spectrum, we have somebody that actually has a plan and has made that plan to end their life. Those are pretty different places to be, and these questions can help us to determine where on that spectrum are they. So they say, yes, I've been thinking about suicide. I might ask them, have you thought about how you might take your life if you were to? If they say yes, I'm going to dive in a little bit more. If have you thought about what you might use? If they say, I don't know, for example, I'm going to take pills. Sometimes people actually have those means in mind, but they don't have a way to get it. They don't have access to it. So this person says, I think I'm going to take pills. I'm going to ask them, where are you in relation to them? Or do you have access to pills? And maybe they say no, but if they say yes, I'm going to ask them, okay, if you were to take those pills, if you were to take your life, have you thought about when you might do so? That's, we're trying to figure out if they thought about a time. If this person has a definite plan, they have the means, they have the desire, the time is set and immediate, that is someone that's at a very high risk for suicide. And, even if you get sort of if you go through this questioning with someone, depending on who it is in your life, depending on if it's sort of within a workplace setting or as part of your job, there may be protocols that you have to follow. So again, this is sort of really in-depth and high-level stuff that you might never do, but valuable to know that it's okay to ask these questions just really directly. I really do feel, though, that if someone's life is at risk, that's a really big risk to keep to yourself. Even if the person that you're engaging with believes that, this is confidential, this won't leave this conversation, gosh, it's just so much for one person to carry the weight of that on their shoulders alone. One of the things I do as part of my job is I go into schools and I talk to kids about this. And we always tell kids, if you learn that a friend of yours is thinking about suicide, you have to tell a trusted adult. As I'm sure you can all imagine, kids never want to break that trust of a friend. Those bonds are so important to them. So they often push back and they say, no, I would never break my friend's trust if they told me this and told me it was a secret. I would never break their trust. I could never go against their wishes. And I'm always like, I hear that. I really do. But, I would rather have a friend who is still here and is mad at me than the friend who's not here anymore. And that's something that I think all of us can think about and kind of keep in mind. So whether it's someone that you work with, a colleague, someone that you work with as part of your job, whether it's family, a friend, just someone in your life, again, it's a lot for one person to carry the weight of that. If you know someone is struggling, I think it's really important to get other people involved and try to get them some help. I'll just briefly touch on safety planning, which is basically trying to have a conversation with someone who's at risk, who's struggling, trying to see what types of things they can do to keep themselves safe. So it's not a contract where they're saying they're not going to end their life. It's just more of a collaborative plan that maybe they come up with you, with a clinician, with someone in their life, and something they can look at and it can kind of help them stay safe. So down there at the bottom, I know the text is a little bit small, but there is a website that has a template, which can be very helpful for people to fill out. But basically, it's just saying to someone, I'm worried about you. Do you think we could have a conversation about some ways that maybe you can stay safe, and kind of engaging with them and seeing what comes to mind for them? Again, this is sort of more what a lot of clinicians do, but definitely, we do it on our helpline. Definitely something that anybody can do. Managing reactions is really, really hard, but so important. If I'm speaking to someone, they just shared with me that they've been thinking about suicide, I might not feel very calm. I mean, my anxiety might be rising. I might start to really freak out. I don't want to show that to them. I don't want to show this to that person, though, because maybe they've been holding this inside for so long and they finally opened up, but now they see that I am, like, my anxiety is raising and I'm starting to get very worked up. It'll make the situation a lot more challenging to deal with. So as best you can, staying calm. And maybe that means that you debrief with someone after and you're not calm at all. But I think in that moment, it is valuable to show that you are calm to that person. But also, to the second bullet point up here, giving yourself permission to be human. We're going to make mistakes. We make mistakes. We're going to say things and afterwards wish we had never said it. We're going to be mad at ourselves. It's just the reality. But, that is something to keep in mind, that we're going to make mistakes. We don't have to be the experts or have all the answers. Debrief. Self-care is important. And the third bullet point from the bottom here is so important to think about. The fact that we all have limitations. We can't always help somebody. If I'm worried about somebody, I want to chain myself to them. I want to keep them safe. I want to watch them 24/7. I want to be there by their side, keeping them safe. But that's just not realistic. And we can only control ourselves. We can't control anybody else, which is a really hard thing to grapple with. I've certainly had experiences in my life, both as a helpline volunteer and outside that realm, of not knowing if someone's going to be okay and having to just remind myself that I did everything that I could do for that person. It's a really hard thing to grapple with, but it's really important to keep in mind, just the limitations that we have and the lack of control that we have sometimes. Just a couple of resources, and I want to mention that, obviously I've been talking about our Samaritans helpline 24/7 by phone or text. Also, the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline has other language capabilities, English, Spanish, and others. And then I think, it's worthwhile to look up what some local resources might be where you are, just to kind of have those in the back of your mind. You can also, I know you can all access this by email afterwards. So, good to look up that mobile crisis intervention program and, you're in your own zip code where you live. So the last thing I want to just mention is, and I know I just said this, that we have limitations. And, I truly believe that suicide can be prevented. And I also know that we can't prevent every suicide. And that kind of contradicts itself. But I do think that's sort of, at least from where I stand, the truth and the reality of suicide. And I do think that with more education, sort of understanding the prevalence of suicide, understanding how those life stressors, how those risk factors can build up for someone, really having a deeper understanding of what warning signs can look like, not being afraid to dive into a conversation about suicide. I think with all of these things we've discussed today, it does put us in a better place to be able to support somebody. So I hope that you all got something out of this. I really, again, encourage you to reach out to our helpline if you are struggling or if you're worried about somebody else. Please feel free to reach out to us. And I think with that, I'm going to pass it back to Carla with NeedyMeds.
Rose, thank you so much for that very thorough presentation. And it's really just we really encourage Rose to return really as much as she's willing to share her expertise, because it is such a tough topic. But Rose and the entire Samaritans team are so compassionate and approachable, and they break down this difficult subject into bits that we can digest and hopefully use in our lives. One thing I do want to stress that before I was introduced to Rose and Samaritans, one misconception I did have is that the helpline was only for people that were right in a crisis mode and contemplating suicide right then. But as just one of the very valuable pieces of information Rose shared is that it's really not only for anybody in crisis, or importantly, if they just need to talk to somebody, but it is also for people that have someone in their life that they're afraid may be contemplating suicide or in a difficult position. And it's really for those people as well to reach out and to get advice. And I'm going to encourage everybody to go ahead and ask any questions, and I do see some coming in, and you can submit those by typing them into the questions section of your GoToWebinar control panel. And as we get to those questions, as promised, I want to leave up the contact information for Samaritans right at the top. And as you can see, you can text or give them a call, or of course visit their website. And if you do have any questions about NeedyMeds, you can reach us as well as that website and 800 number on the bottom of your screen. So I'm going to go ahead and leave that screen up and get to some of the questions coming in. And a reminder to everybody that if we don't get the chance to answer your question, we will follow up with you via email as soon as we can. But we really encourage you to reach out to Samaritans or NeedyMeds as soon as possible if you don't want to wait for that response from us. So, Rose, one of the questions coming in, and you did cover this, and I'm sure you get this a lot, but it's a great opportunity to really drive it home, which is, how do you know if someone is actually suicidal or if they're just making a joke or a comment?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And it is really hard to know. And like I said during the webinar, people sometimes express thoughts of suicide or say something or say they're thinking about suicide, but they really are laughing or joking or seem kind of cavalier about it. And the only way we're going to find out or really understand is if we really dig in and approach them. And so, again, if I came across someone who was talking about this topic but laughing or joking or seemed kind of casual, I would pull them aside and I would say to them, I heard that joke that you made, or I heard that comment, or I saw what you put on Facebook, whatever it might be. I saw what you put in that email. When I hear things like this, gosh, I take it really seriously, because it is a serious thing. So, are these thoughts that you're actually having? Has something been going on? And, again, the fact is people can lie. We can't force the truth out of them. But by approaching it very head on, we might get a better understanding of, were they saying this for, because they were joking, or were they really struggling? One thing I will mention, though, is if somebody says something about suicide and they really say that they're joking, to my mind, there might be something deeper going on if that's kind of the way that they're trying to, quote unquote, get attention, or if that's sort of how they're putting it out there. So even someone who says, no, I'm joking, like something might be behind that that's worth digging in a little bit deeper. And also the fact is, we can, if we're not really sure the seriousness or what's going on, we can dive into some of those questions like that risk assessment we discussed to really sort of really sort of understand, like, you mentioned that you've been having thoughts like you just don't even want to wake up tomorrow. What did you mean by that? Have you actually thought about how you might take your life? And so sort of digging in, and if they don't have answers to those other questions, that might help us understand that, no, they're not actually thinking about it, or no, they are, but they're having thoughts but haven't really gotten beyond that to a plan. So it's okay to dig a little bit deeper in if you're still not really kind of understanding where they're at.
Thank you so much for the audience member for asking that question and for the thorough answer. And it's actually a great segue into the next question that's coming in is, what if someone lets me know that they need help, but I can't be the person to help them?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And, I think that there's a lot of reasons why maybe this can happen. Maybe we have someone in our life who is struggling, and maybe they don't really want help, or they're saying they don't want help. Maybe we have been through something really difficult in our own lives, and it's actually a little bit triggering to help them. Or maybe we just really don't know how to. There's a lot of reasons that could be behind this. I think it's, we have to take care of ourselves first. We have to take care of ourselves at the end of the day. If it's a situation where maybe you feel like I'm not really the best person to support this person, regardless of what the reason is, maybe they're coming to you for advice a lot, or they're coming to you with these thoughts a lot. Whatever it is, I think it's okay to say to someone, I'm really worried about you. I want to be here to support you. I don't know if I'm the best person to be able to give you the help or the advice or the assistance that you really deserve, that you really need. I don't want to abandon you and leave you high and dry, but, maybe we can have a conversation and brainstorm, what resources could you reach out to, or who else can you turn to? What is available to you? And I'm going to help you think about this and brainstorm, because I want to be here for you. But I don't know if I can be there for you the way that you need, or the way that you want, or the way that you deserve. So, that's sort of what I might do, and do it in a really, compassionate and kind way. And again, keeping in mind our own limitations, and keeping in mind the real challenge that we can't always help everybody, but I think we can do sort of soft handoffs and be really kind and compassionate in these situations, and make it feel like we're not abandoning that person. I think that's something that we can do.
Absolutely, and I particularly like that phrase of a soft handoff, which is you want the person to know you are helping them, and you're still there for them. You're not the person they need in this moment, but it's a soft handoff to somebody that may be better equipped to help them in this crisis. And another question coming in, again, this is something that you did get the chance to touch upon, but again, a good opportunity to drive it home is, if I ask someone if they're suicidal, is that putting an idea into their head?
Yeah, I think it's definitely worthwhile to touch on this topic again. And I know there is a lot of fear, can be a lot of fear, a lot of concerns of, if I talk about this, will it influence somebody? Will it drive somebody down a path of actually attempting? And I really want to just reiterate the fact that when someone is thinking about suicide, it's a dark place. It's really complicated. And by talking about it, by asking somebody directly if they have been thinking about suicide, it's not going to sort of further place that idea into their head, or bring them closer to attempting. This is actually a way to prevent suicide. And if I'm talking to someone who's not thinking about suicide, even if they're really struggling, again, this is a complex, dark place to be, and I'm not going to suddenly influence them to do it by asking directly. So, I acknowledge that it takes time and practice to get more comfortable with this topic, but I really just hope that everyone knows that, asking directly about suicide can be a way to prevent suicide, because again, it puts this really stigmatized topic out there, and maybe this person who is struggling wants to desperately talk about it with someone, but they don't know how to or who they can talk to. And one other just quick thing I'll mention is it can be really hard for somebody to sort of come out and say, I'm feeling suicidal. However, if they're asked this question and all they have to do is say a yes or a no, yes, saying yes or no might be really hard, but it can actually be easier to respond with a simple yes or no to the question directly rather than having to sort of come forward and say it. So it's sort of about meeting somebody in the middle, which is an important thing to do with this topic.
I'm really glad because what I was going to say is that we try to keep the question segment brief on these webinars, but I'm really glad you were able to wrap it up with what you just touched upon, especially the point that simply talking about this helps to eliminate the taboo around this subject, and talking and getting it in the forefront and making people comfortable about having conversations about it is a step in the direction of helping to prevent it. So, of course, a huge thank you to Rose for taking time out of her day to share her expertise with the NeedyMeds audience, and a big thank you to our audience for joining us today on this very difficult topic. As I said, we try to keep these question segment brief, so we're going to wrap it up with just those handful of questions. If you did ask a question, we didn't get the chance to answer it, we will follow up with you, but you can always reach out to Samaritans or NeedyMeds at the contact information on your screen. We will convert this webinar into a video, and you'll be able to find it on the YouTube channel so that you can refer back to it or share it with others. And you can always see when Rose is coming back for another webinar on the NeedyMeds calendar of events. And hopefully you'll find other webinars that you're interested in registering for too. And again, that calendar of events is on the homepage of the NeedyMeds website on the bottom right hand. So please do check that out. Space is limited for webinars, so register as soon as you think you're interested. So thanks again to everyone for joining us today. We do hope you stay in touch, and wishing you a wonderful rest of the week. Thanks for your time, and take care. Thanks, Rose.
Thanks. Bye.